In this video, we'll talk about nutrition in human. As you all know, humans have well-developed digestive system, and the digestive system mainly consisting of long tube-like structure known as alimentary canal, which starts with the mouth and ends with the anus. And between the mouth and anus, we have different structure which perform different function during the digestion. We all know that we take varieties of food like rice, chapati, paratha, fruits, vegetable, juice, etc. And all these food that I mentioned are different in nature and texture, and also they have different nutritional value. So though they are different, all these food will be digested by the same alimentary canal. We don't have different alimentary canal for the digestion of different food. So whatever the food that we ingest will be digested by the same digestive system. So Bichara digestive system have to work extra to digest whatever the varieties of food that we thrown into it. But fortunately, we have teeth which helps this alimentary canal for the digestion. You all know that teeth is present in the buccal cavity or the oral cavity, and we have many teeth. Once we eat, these teeth start to crush or grind or masticate the food, and it convert the complex food into simple form of small particle and of same texture. So once we eat the food, the teeth along with the tongue and saliva start to masticate the food. What do you mean by saliva? So when we eat the food, the water will be produced in the buccal cavity. So that water is nothing but the saliva. And this saliva is secreted by the salivary gland that is present in the buccal cavity. So salivary gland produces saliva. Along with the saliva, tongue, the teeth start to grind or masticate the food, and it convert the complex food into fine paste. As I already told, different varieties of food that we eat also have different nutritional value. What do you mean by nutrients? Nutrients are the like complex carbohydrate, protein, vitamins, minerals, fats, etc. So all these things are the nutrients. But these nutrients will be present in the complex form. So our body cannot absorb these complex nutrients. These complex nutrients need to be broken down into simpler form, and that is done with the help of enzyme. So enzymes are the biological catalyst that will be produced inside our body, which will convert complex nutrients into simpler form. So saliva, as I already told, which is produced by the salivary gland, also have that one of the enzyme known as salivary amylase. So saliva also have an enzyme known as salivary amylase, which acts on the complex carbohydrate like starch, and it converts starch into simple sugar. So what happens in the oral cavity or buccal cavity? So when we eat, teeth start to grind or masticate the food, during which salivary amylase of saliva acts on the starch and it converts into simple sugar. The food in the mouth stays for about few minutes, 1 or 2 minutes. After that, we swallow the food, and this food enters the different parts of the alimentary canal, and these food should pass through the alimentary canal in the rhythmic manner, and that will be controlled by the rhythmic contraction and relaxation of the muscles of the wall of the alimentary canal. As I already told, alimentary canal is a tube-like structure which consisting of central cavity surrounded by the wall, and this wall is made up of muscle. So rhythmic contraction and relaxation of these muscles known as peristaltic movement or peristalsis. So the peristaltic movement or the peristalsis is a one which helps in the rhythmic movement of the food throughout the length of the alimentary canal. So upon swallowing, the food from the buccal cavity enter different parts of the alimentary canal by peristalsis or peristaltic movement, which is nothing but the rhythmic contraction and relaxation of the muscles of the wall of the alimentary canal. So upon swallowing, food enters pharynx. From the pharynx, it enters esophagus, and from the esophagus, finally it enters the stomach. Anyhow, between the esophagus and the stomach, there is a band or the sphincter which controls the entry of food from esophagus to stomach. Now the food is present in the stomach. You know that stomach is a sac-like or the bag-like structure which will expand upon entry of the food into the stomach. Again, there is a rhythmic contraction and relaxation of the muscles of the wall of the stomach also, which helps in the mixing of the food with the juice that is produced by the stomach, and that juice is known as gastric juice. So once the food enters the stomach, it will be thoroughly mixed with the gastric juice of the stomach by the contraction and relaxation of the wall of the stomach. So there is a movement of wall of the stomach which helps in the mixing of food with the gastric juice. We'll see how the digestion takes place in the stomach because of the presence of enzymes in the gastric juice, and this gastric juice will be produced by the gastric gland that is present in the wall of the stomach. So wall of the stomach consisting of special type of gland known as gastric gland, and this gastric gland produces gastric juice. And this gastric juice consisting of hydrochloric acid and a protein splitting enzyme known as pepsin and mucus. So gastric gland consisting of varieties of cell which produces hydrochloric acid. Yes, acid is produced in the stomach, that is hydrochloric acid, and it also have a pepsin enzyme which is a protein digesting enzyme. So in the stomach we have protein digesting enzyme known as pepsin, and mucus is also produced by the gastric juice or cells of the gastric gland. First we'll talk about the pepsin. So as I already told, pepsin is a protein digesting enzyme. So in the stomach, upon mixing of food with the gastric juice, the pepsin acts on the protein and it converts into simpler form. Okay, so protein will be acted upon by the protein digesting enzyme known as pepsin, and it converts the protein, complex protein, into simpler form. But for the action of pepsin, it requires acidic medium, and that acidic medium is provided by the hydrochloric acid. So pepsin, for the function, it requires acidic medium and it will be provided by the hydrochloric acid. So hydrochloric acid provide an acidic medium for the functioning of the pepsin, and this pepsin acts on the protein and convert it into simpler form. What about the mucus? This mucus protects the walls of the stomach from the hydrochloric acid. Yes, hydrochloric acid is an acid. If this acid comes directly contact with the walls of the stomach, it leads to irritation. So to avoid that, mucus forms a thin layer in the inner lining of the stomach. Thereby, it prevents the wall of the stomach from the corrosive action of the hydrochloric acid. So that is how the digestion of food takes place in the stomach. In the stomach, the food stays for about 4 to 5 hours. After that, the food enters the small intestine part. So as you can see, this long, highly coiled part is the small intestine part of the alimentary canal. And small intestine is a very long part of the alimentary canal. Because of the highly coiled nature of the small intestine, it can fit into a small abdominal cavity. This receives a food from the stomach after 4 to 5 hours. But there is a sphincter between the stomach and the small intestine. Sphincter is nothing but the ring or band of the muscle. And this sphincter controls the entry of food from stomach to duodenum, that is first part of the small intestine. Only small amount of the food will be released into the small intestine each time. So small amount of food will be released from stomach to small intestine every time, and it will be controlled by the sphincter that is present between the stomach and the small intestine. Once the food enters the duodenum, that is first part of the small intestine, it gets mixed with the juices that is produced by the pancreas known as pancreatic juice, juice that is produced by the liver known as bile juice, and juice that is produced by the intestine known as intestinal juice. So food upon entry into the small intestine, it gets mixed with the pancreatic juice, bile juice and the intestinal juice. And these juices consisting of varieties of enzyme and the component which helps in the digestion of all food that is present in the small intestine. So in the small intestine, there is a completion of a digestion process, that is completion of digestion of carbohydrate, protein and the fat takes place in the small intestine. That is with the help of different enzymes that is present in this juice. We'll see now how the digestion of the food takes place in the small intestine, specifically duodenum part of the small intestine. So food upon entering into the duodenum, it acted upon by the bile juice, and bile juice consisting of a special component known as bile salt. So bile salt acts on the fat that is present in the food. So in the food, the fat will be present in the form of large globules, and the enzyme, that is a lipid splitting enzyme known as lipases, can't directly act on these large fat globules. first it need to be converted into smaller globules, and that process is known as emulsification, and that is done with the help of bile salt that is present in the bile juice. So bile salt act on the larger fat globule and it convert it into emulsified fat or smaller globules, and that process is known as emulsification. After that, this emulsified fat or the smaller globules are acted upon by the lipase enzyme. Okay, so pancreatic juice consisting of pancreatic lipase. Now this pancreatic lipase acts on this emulsified fat and convert them into still simpler form. Okay, so emulsified fat acted upon by the pancreatic lipases and converted into simpler form. Apart from that, pancreatic juice also consisting of protein digesting enzyme known as trypsin. So protein digesting enzyme, that is trypsin, acts on the complex protein and convert it into simpler protein. Apart from that, it also have pancreatic amylase. Like salivary amylase, this pancreatic amylase acts on the complex carbohydrate and it convert it into simpler form. So that is about the component of the pancreatic juice. If we talk about the intestinal juice, the walls of the intestine also have different kinds of gland which produces juice known as intestinal juice, and this intestinal juice also have varieties of enzymes which will complete the digestion. So this intestinal juice have enzyme which convert protein into simpler form, that is amino acid, complex carbohydrate into its simpler soluble form, that is glucose, and it converts complex fat into simpler form, that is fatty acid and glycerol. So final step of the digestion is completed by the enzyme that is present in the intestinal juice, and it takes place in the duodenum part of the small intestine. So finally the complex nutrients will be converted into simple soluble form. Later, the simple soluble nutrients will be absorbed by the walls of the small intestine, that is rest part of the small intestine. Here, the walls of the small intestine consisting of numerous small finger-like projection known as villi, and these villi increases the surface area of absorption, and these villi also are provided with numerous blood vessels which will take up all soluble nutrients. So all soluble nutrients will be absorbed by the villi of the small intestine. Later it enters the bloodstream, and from the blood it will be conveyed to each and every cells of the body, and in each and every cells of the body these soluble nutrients will be converted into energy, or it helps in the building up of the new tissue or helps in the repairing of the damaged tissue. So that is how complex food that we take in the mouth will be converted into simpler soluble form. But all the food that we take will not be absorbed or will not be digested. So there are undigested and insoluble form. This undigested food from the small intestine now enters the large intestine. So undigested insoluble waste now from the small intestine enters the large intestine, and in the large intestine large quantity of the water from this waste will be absorbed and temporarily is stored in the last part of the large intestine known as rectum till defecation. So later this waste will be thrown out of the body through the anus, and it will be controlled by the sphincter that is present in the anus known as anal sphincter. So that is how the complex food that we ingest will be broken down into simpler soluble form, and whatever the waste that is produced will be thrown out of the body in the digestive system. I hope this video is useful. If you like this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. Thank you.